Cole was 7 years old when the sky split open and salvation descended upon a dying world. She remembered standing in the refugee camp outside what used to be Geneva, holding her mother's hand while ash fell like snow around them. The air tasted like metal and smoke. Her little brother had stopped coughing 3 days earlier, not because he got better, but because his lungs had finally given up. They buried him in a shallow grave with no marker, just like millions of others across the poisoned earth. The year was 2089, and humanity was dying. The oceans had turned acidic, the forests had burned, the crops had failed for the 6th consecutive year. Wars over clean water and breathable air had killed more people than the pollution itself. The scientists said they had maybe 20 years left, but everyone knew that was optimistic. His mother whispered prayers every night, though she had stopped believing anyone was listening. Then the ships came. They appeared without warning, hundreds of vessels that glowed with soft blue light, descending through the toxic clouds like angels from old stories. Remembered the screams at first, the panic, the soldiers raising weapons that suddenly felt very small and very useless. But the ships did not attack. They simply hovered, patient and silent, waiting. The beings that emerged were unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. They stood tall and slender, their bodies made of something that looked like living crystal, and they glowed from within with colors that shifted like auroras. They called themselves and they had traveled from a galaxy so distant that its light had not yet reached Earth. Their leader, a being named, spoke in a voice that somehow translated itself into every human language simultaneously. His words were simple. "We have watched you struggle. We have seen your suffering. We wish to help." The world held its breath. Humanity had spent centuries imagining first contact with alien life, writing stories about invasions and wars and the conquest of Earth. No one had imagined this. No one had imagined that aliens would simply appear and offer to help, expecting nothing in return. But that was exactly what they did. Within months, they shared technology that could clean the poisoned air and water. Within years, they taught humanity how to terraform barren worlds into gardens. They gave freely of their medical knowledge, curing diseases that had plagued humans for. Cancer became a memory. Aging became optional. Death itself retreated to the shadows, no longer the inevitable fate of every living thing. And when humanity asked what they wanted in return, simply smiled, his crystalline form pulsing with warm light. "Kindness needs no receipt," he said. "We help because we can, because it is right, because no thinking creature should suffer alone when another can ease their pain." Grew up in a world transformed. She watched humanity spread to the stars on ships powered by technology. She saw colonies bloom on worlds that would have been forever beyond reach. She became a soldier, then an officer, then an admiral in a fleet that protected human interests across 3 galaxies. The longevity treatments kept her young and strong, her body aging only 1 year for every 10 that passed. Now, at 247 years old, Admiral Cole sat in her office aboard the orbital station above New Earth, staring at a transmission that made her ancient heart ache. Ambassador appeared on the screen, but he was not the radiant being she remembered from her childhood. His glow had faded to a dim flicker, like a candle struggling against a cold wind. The crystal of his body looked clouded almost. "Admiral Cole," he said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. "I come to you not as a diplomat but as an old friend. My people face a crisis we cannot solve alone." Leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. "Tell me." The story told was one of cosmic tragedy. The star that warmed thee of was dying, not in the slow, predictable way that stars usually died, but rapidly, catastrophically. Solar physicists had miscalculated. What they thought would be a gradual decline over 400 years was actually a collapse that would kill their sun within 4 decades. 4 decades. For a species that measured their lives in, it was barely a heartbeat. "We have the technology to evacuate our population," explained, his light flickering with each word. We could scatter across the galaxy as refugees, finding shelter where we can, but is more than our home. It is our history, our culture, our connection to everything we have ever been. The sacred groves where our ancestors first achieved consciousness. The libraries that hold 40,000 years of knowledge. The nurseries where our children learn to shape their first light. His voice cracked with emotion. To lose would be to lose ourselves. Sat in silence for a long moment after the transmission ended. She thought about that day in Geneva, when a dying girl watched the sky open and hope descend. She thought about her mother, who had lived another 160 years thanks to medicine, long enough to see her in great spread across a dozen worlds. She thought about her little brother, who had died 3 days before salvation arrived, and how different his fate might have been if they had come just a little sooner. Humanity owed the everything. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of joy and love and possibility that the human race had experienced in the past 2 centuries existed because of their kindness. Reached for her communication panel and contacted Director Brooks at the United Earth Council. Within an hour, representatives from every human colony were assembled in an emergency session. Presented the situation clearly and simply. They were dying, and they needed help. The vote was unanimous, not a single dissenting voice, not a single moment of hesitation. Humanity would save no matter what it cost, no matter what it took. Director Brooks stood before the assembled council and spoke the words that would echo through history. 200 years ago, we were dying alone in the dark. They gave us light. Now their light is fading, and we will not let it go out. We will not forget what they did for us. We will show them, and the entire galaxy, that humanity remembers its friends. The project was given a name that spread across human space like wildfire: Operation Homecoming. And Cole, the little girl who had once watched salvation descend from the sky, would lead humanity's greatest act of gratitude. Daniel had spent his entire career solving problems that other engineers said were impossible. He had built bridges across canyons of frozen methane on Titan. He had designed stations that could orbit black holes without being torn apart. He had created machines that could harvest energy from the hearts of dying stars. But when he looked at the holographic display showing the system, he felt something he had not experienced in decades: doubt. The problem was simple to understand and almost impossible to solve. The OV needed to be moved, not evacuated, not abandoned, moved. The entire planet, all 6.2 trillion metric tons of it, had to be taken from its current orbit around a dying star and transported to a new home 340 light-years away. Daniel stood in the main planning chamber aboard the orbital station, surrounded by the minds humanity had produced. Dr. Laura, head of the Planetary Mechanics Division, pulled up the calculations on the main display. The numbers were staggering. To move a planet of this mass, she explained, her voice steady despite the impossibility of what she was describing, we would need to generate energy equivalent to every nuclear weapon ever built by humanity, by a factor of 10 billion. We would need to construct gravity engines larger than anything we have ever attempted. We would need to synchronize the efforts of thousands of ships with perfect precision, because even a tiny error could tear the planet apart. The room fell silent. Daniel watched the faces of his colleagues, seeing the same mixture of determination and fear that he felt himself. This was not like building a bridge or designing a station. This was asking them to do something that the laws of physics seemed to forbid. But then Captain spoke up from the back of the room. Was a fleet commander, a practical man who had spent 30 years navigating ships through the dangers of deep space. He was not a scientist or an engineer, but his voice carried a weight that made everyone listen. My grandmother was dying, he said quietly. Back in 2187, during the plague on 22B, the human doctors had given up. They said there was nothing more they could do, but a medical team came to our colony. They did not have to. We were just a small mining settlement on the edge of nowhere, but they came anyway and they saved her. He stepped forward, his eyes meeting Daniel's. My grandmother lived another 112 years after that. She held her great-great in her arms. My entire family exists because of a kindness that they showed to strangers. So when you tell me this task is impossible, I hear something different. I hear that it will be hard. I hear that it will cost us. But impossible, no. We do not get to call it impossible, not after what they did for us. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a spark of determination replacing the doubt. Was right. They did not get to give up, not on this, not ever. The call went out across human space. Every colony, every station, every ship received the same message. They need our help, and we need volunteers. Daniel expected a good response. What he got was overwhelming. Engineers abandoned contracts worth billions of credits to join the project. Scientists left prestigious positions at the finest universities. Miners redirected their asteroid-hauling ships without being asked, simply pointing their vessels toward the system and setting off. Military officers requested transfer to Operation Homecoming in such numbers that the fleet had to turn people away. Within 6 months, humanity had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. 47,000 vessels hung in formation around the dying star, crewed by 12 million volunteers. Not a single person had been conscripted or forced. Every single human present had chosen to be there. Daniel worked without sleep for days at a time, designing the gravity engines that would make the impossible possible. Each engine was the size of a small moon, a massive construction of metal and energy that would generate artificial gravity fields strong enough to move a world. They would need dozens of them, positioned in precise orbit around, working in perfect harmony. The first engine took 3 months to build. By the time it was finished, the teams had become so efficient that they could construct one every 2 weeks. Soon, a ring of massive machines surrounded the, humming with contained power. On the surface of, the watched with emotions that humans could barely comprehend. They had helped countless species throughout their long history, but none had ever responded like this. Ambassador stood before the human delegation and struggled to find words. When we came to Earth, he finally said, we found a species drowning in its own mistakes. Dying, afraid, alone. We offered what help we could because that is what we believe in. We never expected anything in return. We did not help you so that one day you would help us. We helped you because it was the right thing to do. His crystalline form flickered with colors that represented deep emotion. And yet here you are, millions of you, building machines to move our entire world, sacrificing your time, your resources, your very lives, for a species that asked nothing of you. Admiral Cole stepped forward and placed her hand on the ambassador's shoulder. Despite their different forms, despite the centuries and light years that separated their origins, the gesture felt natural. Right. You taught us something important, said. You taught us that kindness is not weakness, that helping others is not foolish, that the universe is better when thinking beings take care of each other. She smiled, and in that smile was the memory of a 7-year-old girl watching salvation descend from a poisoned sky. We are only doing what you taught us to do. We are only being what you helped us become. His glow brightened slightly, the first time it had done so in months. You truly believe you can do this, move an entire planet across the stars. Daniel, standing nearby with engine schematics still displayed on his tablet, answered before anyone else could speak. Honestly, I do not know. The physics says it should be impossible. The math says we do not have enough energy. Everything I learned in school says this cannot work. He paused, looking out the window at the fleet that filled the sky. Thousands of ships crewed by millions of humans who had come to repay a debt. But we are going to try anyway. And if there is one thing I have learned about humanity, it is this. We are very good at doing things that should be impossible, especially when we have something worth fighting for. The work continued. The engines hummed. And across the galaxy, humanity held its breath and hoped. the star screamed as it died. That was how Lieutenant Commander would later describe it to anyone who asked. The sun released radiation bursts that registered on sensors like the howling of a wounded animal, each pulse a reminder that time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. Stood at the command station of Orbital Platform 7, overseeing the delicate process of connecting the gravity engines to the planet's magnetic field. It was precise work, the kind that required steady hands and absolute concentration. One mistake could disrupt the entire operation. One error could doom a world. She had been working for 18 hours straight when the alarms began to scream. The dying star released a burst of radiation unlike anything they had seen before. The sensors barely had time to register it before the wave hit. Orbital Platform 7 shuddered and was thrown against her console as emergency lights painted everything in harsh red. "All personnel evacuate to shelter zones," the automated voice announced. "Radiation levels critical. Repeat, all personnel evacuate immediately." Pulled herself up and looked at her display. The radiation was worse than the shelter zones could handle, much worse. She activated the communication system with trembling fingers. "This is Platform 7 to Fleet Command. We have a Class 5 radiation event, requesting immediate evacuation of all personnel." The response came back crackling with interference. "Platform 7, evacuation ships are en route. Estimated arrival time 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Looked at the radiation readings climbing on her screen. They did not have 14 minutes. She made a decision in that moment, the kind of decision that separates ordinary people from heroes. She activated the platform-wide communication system and spoke in a voice far calmer than she felt. "All personnel, proceed to the central core. Seal all bulkheads behind you. We are going to concentrate our shielding and wait for evacuation." It was not enough. She knew it even as she gave the order. The central core had better shielding than the rest of the platform, but against a Class 5 burst, it would only delay the inevitable. Some of them were going to die today. 340 humans died on Orbital Platform 7. They died at their posts, still working to save a world that was not their own. They died holding each other's hands in the central core, waiting for rescue ships that arrived 4 minutes too late. They died with the names of loved ones on their lips and the knowledge in their hearts that they had given everything for something greater than themselves. Survived. She did not know why she lived when so many others did not. The doctors said something about her being in the perfect spot when the bulkhead sealed, about random chance and dumb luck. She did not feel lucky. She felt hollow. Among the dead was Commander's wife, Christina. She had been an environmental engineer, one of the best in the fleet, assigned to ensure that the gravity engines did not damage the ecosystem. She died trying to seal a breach in the platform's outer shell, buying precious seconds for others to reach safety. When the news reached Commander, he was on the surface of coordinating ground operations with the people. Expected him to leave, to request transfer, to take time to mourn. Instead, he wiped his eyes, straightened his uniform, and went back to work. "She would have wanted me to finish this," he told Captain when asked why he stayed. "Christina believed in what we were doing here. She believed it was worth any cost. If I leave now, if I give up, then her death means nothing. I will not let that happen." The tragedy spread across human space like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. 340 names, 340 stories, 340 families that would never be whole again. For a moment, people wondered if the cost was too high, if perhaps they should abandon this impossible mission and save themselves while they could. Then the donations started pouring in. The colony of New Tokyo sent its entire strategic reserve of rare materials, enough to build 3 more gravity engines. The mining operations on Europa shut down completely, every single ship redirected to carry supplies to the system. Private citizens sent personal spacecraft, family heirlooms, anything they could offer. A 12-year-old girl named Sophie, living on a small farming colony in the outer reaches of human space, sent 40 credits. It was her birthday money, saved for months. Her letter arrived at Fleet Command and was read aloud to the assembled officers. "Dear space people," she wrote in careful, childish handwriting. "My teacher told us about the glowing aliens who saved Earth a long time ago. She said they are in trouble now and need help. I want to help too. Please use my birthday money to help the nice glowing people. They helped my great-great-great-grandma, and that means they helped me too. Thank you. Love, Sophie." Admiral Cole read the letter with tears streaming down her face. She ordered it framed and hung in the main command center where everyone could see it. A reminder of why they were here. A reminder of what they were fighting for. Doctor, the project's lead physicist, worked without rest after the tragedy. He pushed his mind to its limits and beyond, searching for a solution that would let them move the planet faster, safer, with less risk of another disaster. And 3 weeks after the deaths on Platform 7, he found it. "We can create a subspace bubble," he announced to the assembled fleet commanders. "By synchronizing the warp fields of 30,000 ships, we can generate a field large enough to enclose the entire planet. Instead of pushing through normal space, we can fold space around it. The journey that would take centuries using conventional methods could be completed in hours." The room buzzed with excitement, but Doctor held up his hand. His face was serious, even grave. "There is a risk. We have never attempted anything like this before. The calculations suggest a 23% chance of catastrophic failure. If the bubble collapses while we are in transit, the planet and everything on it will be destroyed." Silence fell over the room. A 23% chance of failure. Nearly 1 in 4 odds that they would accidentally kill the very people they were trying to save. The representatives offered to evacuate instead, to scatter across the galaxy as refugees rather than risk annihilation. But Admiral Cole shook her head. "We did not come this far to give up now," she said. "We did not lose 340 of our people just to abandon you at the finish line. We will take the risk. We will save your world." She looked around the room at the faces of humans and alike. "We do not leave family behind, and that is what you are now. Family. The day the universe changed began like any other day in the system. The dying sun rose over, casting its weak red light across ancient forests and crystal cities. The went about their morning routines, tending to their gardens, teaching their children, living their lives as they had for 40,000 years. But in orbit above them, 30,000 human ships were arranging themselves into a perfect sphere around their world. Commander sat at the coordination center aboard the flagship, watching the holographic display that showed every vessel in the fleet. Each ship was a tiny point of light, and together they formed a shell of hope around a planet that was running out of time. His job was to ensure that every single one of those ships fired its engines at precisely the same microsecond. Not the same second, not the same millisecond, the same microsecond. A human heartbeat takes about 800 milliseconds. Had to synchronize 30,000 ships with an accuracy of 1/1000th of a heartbeat. If even a handful of ships fired late or early, the resulting gravitational stress could tear apart. The pressure should have been unbearable, instead felt strangely calm. He had trained his entire life for moments like this. Every simulation, every drill, every long night studying the mathematics of coordinated fleet movements had led to this single day. He was ready. On the surface of, they gathered in their ancient meeting places to witness the impossible. Elder, the oldest living member of their species at 4,000 years, addressed his people from the steps of the Great Library, a building that had stood for 30. "We have traveled the stars for longer than most species have existed," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd through crystalline harmonics. "We have met 1,000 different forms of intelligent life. We have seen empires rise and fall, stars born and die, galaxies collide and merge. In all that time, in all those encounters, we have never witnessed what the humans are doing today. His light pulsed with colors that represented wonder, gratitude, and a deep, aching hope. They are not repaying a debt. Debts can be calculated, measured, balanced. What they are doing goes beyond any calculation. They are demonstrating something that we, in all our wisdom and all our years, never truly understood. They are showing us that love and gratitude can transcend the boundaries of species. That connection between thinking beings is stronger than distance, stronger than time, stronger even than the laws of physics that govern the universe. He paused, his ancient eyes turning toward the sky where human ships hung like a constellation of promises. Today, we will learn if that love is strong enough to move a world. In orbit, received the final confirmations from every ship in the fleet. All systems were ready. All crews were in position. The gravity engines surrounding hummed with contained power, waiting to be unleashed. Captain's voice came through the communication system, calm and steady. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Final countdown begins now. Synchronize your systems to the master clock. On my mark, we make history. Watch the timer on his display count down. 10 seconds. 9, 8. Across the fleet, 12 million humans held their breath. In the coordination center, officers gripped their consoles with white-knuckled hands. On the surface of 800 million looked up at a sky filled with alien ships that had come to save them. 765. Engineer Lane sat at her station aboard a repair shuttle positioned at the edge of the subspace bubble zone. Her job was to monitor the structural integrity of the warp field once it formed. If any cracks appeared, she would have to pilot her tiny vessel into the unstable zone and fix them manually. 432. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of her command ship, her eyes fixed on the planet below. She thought of her mother, who had held her hand in a refugee camp while ash fell from a poisoned sky. She thought of her brother, who had died 3 days before salvation arrived. She thought of all the years between then and now, all the lives saved, all the futures made possible by a simple act of kindness. 1. Mark. 30,000 ships fired their engines as one. The energy output was so massive that it registered on sensors 3 galaxies away. Astronomers on distant worlds would later describe it as a sudden flare of impossible brightness, a beacon that burned through the darkness of space like nothing they had ever seen. Space itself seemed to scream as the subspace bubble formed around. The planet shuddered, its entire mass shifting as gravitational forces beyond comprehension gripped it and pulled it free from its dying sun. Mountains trembled. Oceans sloshed in their basins. They held onto each other as their world moved beneath their feet. And then was gone. Where a planet had hung in orbit moments before, there was now only empty space and a dying star. The subspace bubble had swallowed an entire world and carried it into a dimension where the normal rules of physics did not apply. Inside the bubble, time moved strangely. The transit that should have taken centuries would instead take only 72 hours. But those 72 hours were the most dangerous part of the journey. The bubble had to be maintained with perfect precision, or it would collapse and destroy everything inside it. Lane worked without sleep, monitoring the bubble's integrity from her repair shuttle. When stress fractures appeared in the field during hour 31, she did not hesitate. She piloted her small vessel into the unstable zone, where the very fabric of space was tearing itself apart, and manually repaired the damage. "Someone has to do it," she told her worried crew over the communication system as gravitational forces battered her shuttle. "And I have got steady hands." For 72 hours, the fleet maintained the bubble through sheer determination. Exhausted crews worked in shifts, each team pushing themselves beyond their limits before collapsing into brief sleep and then returning to their stations. They watched in awe as humans fought against the fundamental forces of the universe to keep their world intact. And then, after 3 days that felt like 3 lifetimes, the bubble opened, emerged into normal space 340 light-years from where it had started. Below the planet stretched a new sky, dominated by a stable yellow sun that humanity had prepared for them. Terraforming crews had spent 2 years modifying the surrounding space, building defense platforms, communication relays, and agricultural satellites to ensure that they would want for nothing in their new home. The planet settled into its new orbit as gently as a leaf falling onto still water. It was done. Humanity had moved a world. The celebration came later. First came the silence, the long, breathless moment when every sensor confirmed what seemed impossible was intact. The atmosphere remained. The oceans stayed in their basins. The forests still stood. 800 million were alive, their world transported across the stars to a new home around a healthy sun. Then came the tears. Admiral Cole did not remember falling to her knees on the bridge of her command ship. She did not remember the moment when her composure finally broke after months of pressure and fear and desperate hope. She only remembered the feeling of her cheeks wet with tears and the sound of her own voice whispering words she had never expected to say. "We did it, we actually did it." Around her, officers embraced each other. Hardened soldiers wept openly. Somewhere in the fleet, someone started singing an old Earth song about coming home, and soon the melody spread from ship to ship until 12 million voices were raised in ragged, joyful chorus. On the surface of, they emerged from their shelters and looked up at their new sky. Their sun, the star they had orbited for 40,000 years, was gone. In its place hung a younger, brighter star that would warm their world for billions of years to come. The sight was strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. But above them, filling the heavens like a promise kept, the human fleet still hung in perfect formation. 30,000 ships that had carried their world across the impossible vastness of space, crewed by beings who had owed them nothing and given them everything. Elder walked slowly through the streets of the capital city, his ancient light burning brighter than it had in centuries. Around him, of all ages reached out to touch him, to share in the wonder of survival. He made his way to the great plaza at the center of the city, where a holographic communication link had been established with the human fleet. Ambassador was already there, his form radiant with colors that no human eye could fully perceive. When the link activated, and Admiral Cole's face appeared on the display, stepped forward to speak. But no words came. For the first time in his 400 years of diplomatic service, Ambassador found himself unable to speak. The emotions were too vast, too complex, too overwhelming to compress into language. He simply stood there, his light flickering with patterns that expressed what words could not. Understood. After 200 years of knowing she had learned to read their light. "You do not have to say anything," she said softly. "We know." Sklo steadied and he found his voice at last. 200 years ago, we found a species drowning on a poisoned world. We offered our hand because it was the right thing to do. We never expected anything in return. We did not save humanity because we wanted gratitude. We saved them because they were suffering and we could help. He paused, gathering himself. Today, that species moved our entire world across the stars to save us from extinction. They sacrificed their resources, their time, their lives. 892 humans died to save us. Their names are burned into our memory forever, carried in our light until the last fades into darkness. Felt fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. 892. She knew every name on that list. She had written letters to every family, trying to express gratitude that felt inadequate no matter how many words she used. "The humans have a saying," continued. "What goes around comes around." We have learned its meaning today, but we have also learned something else, something far more important. His light flared with intensity, painting the plaza in colors of gold and silver and deepest blue. We learned that humanity never forgets an ally. Their thankfulness can move planets, literally. In the months that followed, the bond between humans and deepened into something that neither species had words for. Alliance was too cold a term. Friendship did not capture the depth of connection. They were more than partners, more than allies, more than neighbors in a vast and indifferent universe. They were family. Mixed colonies began to appear across both empires. Human children learned to read the light patterns of emotions, while youth embraced human music and art with passionate enthusiasm. Cultural exchange flourished in ways that surprised everyone. Bioluminescence became fashionable among human youth, who wore crystalline jewelry that mimicked the shifting colors. Human rock music became wildly popular performed by bands of glowing beings who had never heard a guitar before, and now could not imagine life without one. A memorial was constructed in orbit around the new sun. It was a massive ring of crystal and steel, inscribed with 892 names in both human letters and light script. Every year on the anniversary of Operation Homecoming, ships from across both empires gathered there to remember those who gave their lives to save a world. And in every human school, in every colony from Earth to the edges of known space, children learned the story of what humanity had done. They learned about the who had come to save a dying world 2 centuries before. They learned about the fleet that answered the call when those same beings needed help. They learned about sacrifice and gratitude, and the strange, beautiful truth that kindness echoes across the ages. 60 years after Operation Homecoming, Admiral Cole passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 307. She had lived long enough to see her great-great playing with children in the gardens of New Earth. She had lived long enough to know that the bond between their species would endure for. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every human colony and every settlement. Ambassador, still serving despite his advanced age, spoke at the ceremony. "Cole was 7 years old when we came to Earth," he said. "She watched our ships descend through a poisoned sky and wondered if salvation had finally arrived. 200 years later, she led the fleet that saved our world. She was a bridge between our peoples, a reminder that the kindness we showed to humanity was not given in vain." He turned to face the assembled mourners, human and alike. "She taught us the most important lesson any species can learn, that gratitude is not weakness, that helping others is never wasted, that when someone saves you at your lowest moment, you carry that debt in your heart forever." His light brightened one final time. "And if you ever get the chance to repay it, you move planets." Far above, in the memorial ring that circled the sun, 892 names glittered in the starlight. They were remembered, they were honored, they were loved. Because humanity never forgets an ally. And their thankfulness can move worlds.